Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my power rankings for the 2024 Formula E Berlin ePrix. Two pretty decent races, pretty chaotic though, so we'll see how that kind of factors into my power rankings. I think the one big thing though was that we did have all of those reserve drivers, or basically substitute drivers, come in. So it did make things a little bit tricky on that front, but nonetheless, I think I've gotten a pretty good idea of where I want to put people. So, starting at number 22, I've gone with Jake Hughes. So for Hughes, a really tough weekend. It was split qualifying with his rookie teammate, Taylor Barnard. And I think that was actually the only teammate head-to-head where one driver didn't take both sessions. So in a lot of cases, the more experienced driver basically swept their teammate. But here, Barnard actually out-qualifying Hughes that first race in Berlin. Bit of a surprise there, but for Hughes, I think the bigger disappointment was that he had no points, didn't get any points this weekend. Yeah, had a couple of incidents as well, and his teammate looked pretty good. So I think a pretty rough weekend overall for Hughes. Number 21, I'm going to go with Norman Nato. So for Nato, a tough weekend. The first race, I think, had to come in for a front wing change. That race was pretty much a disaster. Obviously, qualifying for Andretti, that first race was pretty tough as well. Second race, qualifying obviously went really well. It seems like they've turned a corner. We'll see in Shanghai if that form continues. But then, unfortunately, made that really clumsy mistake, going way too aggressive on a move that wasn't there. Again, Sasha Fenestraz put Fenestraz in the wall, picked up a 10-second time penalty. Honestly, I think he's a bit lucky that he didn't DNF himself and then pick up a good penalty for the next race. Number 20, out-qualified both races and beaten in both races is, again, Sasha Fenestraz. You know, Oliver Rowland showing what's capable in that car, and for Sasha Fenestraz, he's simply not matching Rowland at this point. And I think there's a lot of surprise with that, given how Fenestraz looked quite promising his first year in Formula E, and you would expect him to take a decent jump next year. The fact that his teammate last year was Nato, and then going to, Rowland, who's generally a more established driver, definitely seems like it's a bit of a jump. So another rough weekend for Fenestraz. Obviously, the collision with Nato wasn't really his fault, but we still had the other race, and that race wasn't particularly great either. All right, number 19. I'm going to go with Dan Ticktum. So for Ticktum, qualifying continues to be a struggle, a bit of an oddity, a bit of a question mark. Out-qualified both races by Sergio Sette Camara in the race, and then in the first race picked up that 5-second time penalty for the collision with Lucas Di Grassi, a bit of a clumsy move there. And yeah, split the races with Sette Camara, but still, yeah, a bit of an anonymous weekend for Dan Ticktum. Number 18, I'm going to go with Stoffel Van Dorn. So for Van Dorn, qualifying went quite well, and that's generally been the case for most of Gen 3 qualifying. It's been pretty good, but the races were not so good. First race wasn't really able to keep up with the lead pack, and then second race made that clumsy mistake at turn 9, ruining his front wing, basically climbing over the back of, I believe, wasn't Mortar, it might have been Mortar, but anyway, yeah, Van Dorn, clumsy mistake, lost his front wing there. Race was basically ruined from that point. All right, number 17, I'll go with one of the substitute drivers, and that is Paul Aaron. Of course, for the substitute drivers, I'm not going too hard on them because I know it's their first weekend in Formula E this year, coming in with very little testing, etc. Obviously, they'll have some sim time, and some of these drivers had prior Formula E experience, but still, they're not going to be at the top, but I'm not going to be too harsh on them either. So for Aaron, he was out-qualified both times by his teammate, Joel Eriksson, and split the races because Eriksson crashed out of the first race. So for Aaron, a bit of a tricky weekend. I think a really good learning experience for him, though. We know in theory the Envision is a pretty good car. It uses the same Jaguar powertrain, and Eriksson, that second race, would be able to show some potential with that car. I think for Aaron, youngest driver of the ones that are debuting this weekend, not necessarily this season, but least experience. I think still a lot of learning for him to do, but I don't think he did too terribly. And I think maybe if things go the right way in the future, maybe he'll have a Formula E seat in 2 or 3 years' time. All right, number 16. So I had to grab a new marker because this one's clearly dying. Number 16, I'm gonna go with Jordan King. So for King, yeah, a bit of a tough weekend. Another driver who for this was their first foray into Formula E. Of course, was out-qualified both races by his teammate Edo Mortara and beaten in both races. But that's kind of very reasonable to expect. Was close to the points the first race. Second point's a bit lower down. Didn't really see a whole lot of him throughout the weekend. Wasn't really in that fight at the front. So yeah, hard to really comment beyond that about his weekend. Number 15. I'm going to go with Sergio Seti Camara. So for Camara, out-qualified his teammate Dan Ticktum twice and then split the races. The races were interesting. I think the first race started very, very high. Unfortunately, wasn't always able to stay up near that front group. And we kind of knew that was the case with these cars that aren't as efficient. We knew that with how wide Berlin is and how easy it is to basically change positions, overtake. We knew that like these less efficient cars would fall down the order. For Seti Camara, not a great weekend, no points obviously, but still not a terrible weekend either. Number 14, I'm going to go with Kelvin van der Linde. So for van der Linde, out-qualified both races, but did split the races with his teammate, although one of those, that one race was when Degrassi got crashed out. So, but that nonetheless for van der Linde, not a terrible result. Qualifying, I think, a little bit slower than you would have liked. But that being said, I think the first qualifying definitely would have been better than any of his sessions last year. The races were okay. I think was close to the points. That first race, I think 11th. Second race, I think 15th. Again, not too far off the points. But still, I think definitely a better showing than his debut last year, replacing Robin Fines, but still kind of a bit off the pace of his teammate Lucas Degrassi. All right, number 13, I'm going to go with Max Gunther. For Gunther, qualifying went pretty well. Out-qualified Jehan Daruvula both races. Was into the duels both times as well. And then, fortunately, DNF'd both races. So, let's see. The first one, I think, crashed into the wall with kind of collided with Jake Hughes as well at that point. And it looked like he damaged his front wing because he basically just went in a straight line into the wall. Second one, looks like he got maybe hit from behind slightly and then hit his front wing into the back of the car in front of him, damaging the front wing there. So a bit of an unfortunate weekend, a bit unlucky there, I felt, but nonetheless, looked like he had pretty strong pace all weekend. All right, number 12, I'm going to go with his teammate, Jehan Daruvula. So for Daruvula, unfortunately out-qualified twice, but did beat Gunther both times. But that being said, did finish in the points. Really good result for him that second race with a 7th place finish. Starting to show some of the speed that he needs to be showing if he wants to stay around next year. I think good result for him, good solid points. I think unfortunately it's a bit late in the season to really make a big difference in the team's championship. But Daruvula is going to try to get as many points as he can, and maybe hopefully help Maserati move up a position or two in that team's championship. All right, number 11. I'm going to go with one of the debutants, and that was, well, not necessarily debutant, but one of the substitute drivers, and that is Joel Eriksson. So for Eriksson, out-qualified his teammate Paul Aaron twice, and then split the race. Of course, had that crash. The first race, broken suspension. Not ideal, but the second race got some points, 2 points in the end, so really good result for him. Really good showing for Eriksson overall, I thought, on such short notice. Number 10, I'm going to go with, moving into the top 10, I'm going to go with Mitch Evans. So for Evans, bit of a tough weekend, out-qualified and out-raced by his Jaguar teammate Nick Cassidy. But that being said, I don't think he had a terrible weekend, got double points finish, 4th and 6th respectively, both races. So honestly, a pretty good result there for Evans. Good solid show, haul of points. But I think would be a bit disappointed not to get at least a podium in one of the two races. And of course made that mistake at the end of the second race, was in 4th place and then had that bit of a lockup, turn 6, lost a couple of positions there. So I think he'll be regretting that mistake a little bit as well. Number 9, I'm going to go with Lucas Degrassi. So for Degrassi, qualifying went very well, got into the duels. The first race, second race, I think just missed out. And it looked like, I think that first race, like he could have been on for a good haul of points before the contact with Dan Ticktum. Second race qualifying not as good as the first race, but then in the ePrix finished 11th on the road. So honestly, pretty good result for Degrassi, and a lot of that result is basically the really strong qualifying performance I felt that he showed in that first race. Number 8, I'm going to go with Pascal Wehrlein. So for Wehrlein, out-qualified his teammate Antonio Felix da Costa twice, split the races. First race honestly was okay, not amazing, just off the podium, and then second race a little bit behind his teammate, who obviously went on to win the race. So not a terrible weekend for Wehrlein. Of course, two higher points finishes, but again, similar to Evans, no podium. Number 7, I'm going to go with Antonio Felix da Costa. Now, for da Costa, out-qualified both races by Pascal Wehrlein. First race wasn't so great. Finished in 6th place, I believe, and I felt like there was a little bit more pace there in the car. And then second race, obviously, really good result, and really good job of being in the right place at the right time in the end, basically when the cars started defending position much more heavily and holding on to position, taking that lead very late in the race. So yeah, really good result for him. It hasn't been disqualified yet, so first official win of the season for da Costa. Alright, number 6, I'm going to go with Eduardo Mortara. For Mortara, out-qualified his teammate Jordan King twice, and then beat him twice in the races. So for Mortara, excellent qualifying performance. That first race, pole position in a Mahindra, definitely quite an unexpected result. Able to convert that into a, what was it? It was an 8th place finish, which honestly in the Mahindra is a really good result. I know, you'd maybe be a bit disappointed from going from pole to 8th, but in a track like Berlin and in a Mahindra, honestly it's a pretty good result, and I think you'll be very happy with that. Second race, qualifying not as good, and then in the race I think a bit of damage with the front wing, but still that result on the first race was excellent, so that's why I have him as high up as they do. Number 5, I'm going to go with John-Eric Vergne. So for Vergne, qualifying not quite as good as Van Dorn this weekend, but in the beat Van Dorn both races. Really strong second place result in the first race. Second race, not as good. It seems like he didn't really have the pace to stay with the leaders and ended up finishing in 10th. Number 4, one of the stars of the weekend I felt was Taylor Barnard. So for Barnard, split qualifying with his teammate and then beat Jake Hughes twice in the races, which is honestly very impressive for your second and third time out in Formula E. And honestly, at points towards the end of the second race, was doing very well on energy relative to the cars around him. Was basically at points the leader for energy in the top 10. It looked like at points like he might have been able to get a 6th place in the end, but unfortunately lost. Wasn't able to quite overtake. Was overtaken by Dennis and then overtaken by Derula in the closing laps. Ended up finishing 8th, but still really good result I felt for Barnard, and definitely did a bit more than what I expected coming into this weekend. Number 3, I'm going to go with Jake Dennis. For Dennis, let's see, so out-qualified his teammate Normanado twice. Obviously had that what looked like front wing damage the second race. Qualifying the first race, qualifying obviously was a disaster. Still out-qualified Nato. Definitely seemed like it was some kind of setup issue, but the efficiency in the race was excellent, and he basically was able to push himself up into that lead group with relative ease, basically towards the 1/3 midway mark of the race. Unfortunately got that damage. Didn't seem like it was his fault. He said it was pushed into the wall, forced to retire. The second race takes pole. Wasn't able to hold on to the win, drops down to 5th place, which was a bit unfortunate. I think he probably lost a bit too much. He obviously had that front wing damage as well from battling Wehrlein, and I think that did cost him some performance in the end. But nonetheless, I think a really solid weekend for Dennis. Number 2, I'm going to go with Oliver Rowland. So for Rowland, 2 mediocre qualifying sessions in a row, but that being said, 2 third places, 2 podiums. Really good race pace, really strong racecraft as well. A little bit aggressive at times, but that's kind of always how he's been. And yeah, really excellent result with a double podium in Berlin. So that of course leads us to number 1, who is of course none other than Nick Cassidy. So for Cassidy, out-qualified Evans twice and beat Evans in the race twice as well. 2 podiums, 1 win, 1 third place. Really good, really excellent result. I think he'll be quite pleased with that. And I think it was win and then second. Yeah, win and then second place. Really good result for Cassidy. Massively beneficial for his championship odds. At this point, he's almost a full win ahead of Pascal Wehrlein in second. So with 6 races left, honestly, the number of title protagonists, number of title challengers, I think is really dropping quite rapidly. At this point, you can make an argument that there's only 3 drivers who really have a chance. They are Roland, Wehrlein, and Cassidy. So, of course, Cassidy at the front of that group with a nice lead over Wehrlein in second. So, really good result for Cassidy. Really strong weekend and doing a great work for his championship challenge. Anyway, there's my power rankings for the 2024 Berlin ePrix. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.